That shouldn't be a Democratic issue or a Republican issue. It should be an American issue. It'd be nice if folks would place the country ahead of the party. There is a humanitarian crisis at the border. There are children who are being held in unspeakable conditions. These are God's children. Well, there is no national emergency at the border. It's all made up. It's presidential fiction, and it's part of Donald Trump's effort to try to find a lifeline to get out of this reckless shutdown that he's caused and now is holding the American people hostage. There is a humanitarian crisis at the border. Well, there is no national emergency at the border. It's all made up. It's presidential fiction.
My fellow Americans, tonight I am speaking to you because there is a growing humanitarian and security crisis at our southern border. Every day, Customs and Border Patrol agents encounter thousands of illegal immigrants trying to enter our country.
The number of apprehensions at the border right now is at one of its lowest levels in about 2 decades.
This is a humanitarian crisis, a crisis of the heart and a crisis of the soul. Last month, 20,000 migrant children were illegally brought into the United States, a dramatic increase.
And so now, because of Trump's inability to successfully deliver on that political promise, he's going to stand before the American people and make up the notion that there's a national emergency. It's something that we need to address, and address with the fierce urgency of now.
The American people are going to watch him tonight, less than 2 hours from now, without a filter, no fact checkers. The president is just pushing his line. What do you want to warn them about as they watch him?
Well, we're concerned that he's going to try to fool the American people. The president should be ashamed of himself for using children as political pawns. That has to end this week. Is this unfortunate that he is going to try to utilize the opportunity to deliver an address from this hallowed office in order to appeal once again to his narrow base amongst the American people? There is a humanitarian crisis at the border. There is no national emergency at the border. It's all made up. Donald Trump wants a medieval border wall and is trying to force us to pay a $5 billion plus ransom note. A $5 billion ransom note for a medieval border wall that will not be effective. Because Donald Trump wants to build a medieval border wall. For the last 2 years, Republicans have controlled the House, the Senate, and the presidency, yet no border wall.
Republicans have controlled the House, the Senate, and the presidency, yet no border wall.
And given that you need at least 60 votes to get it through in the Senate, and Republicans only hold 53?
We've had 2 years where Republicans have controlled the House, the Senate, and the presidency. No border walls.
First, he has to talk to Democrats before he can get his own Republicans on board. And they know that ultimately, whatever it is, has to find bipartisan support in order to get through the Senate.
The Democrats, the radical left's new talking point is to call what is death and destruction and chaos caused by unsecure borders nothing more than a manufactured crisis.
4 congressmen, including House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer of Maryland.
There is no crisis at the border.
I expect the president to lie to the American people. Why do I expect this? Because he has been lying to the American people. The fact of the matter is that the number of apprehensions, the number of migrants crossing the border is way down over the last few years. There's not an emergency of that nature. There is no security crisis at the border.
The security issue that he's raising, this emergency at the border, is fake. The whole point of that wall is to get his folks stirred up.
And this national emergency is completely made up. If you look at the facts, violent crime is down across the United States, property crime is down, immigrants commit less crime, and border crossings are down. The president's going to lose in court.
The feeling from this administration is that we are in a full-blown crisis and that they are overwhelmed by it. How do you think they should tackle it?
I don't believe their narrative. I don't believe the BS.
There's no emergency. It's a fake, and everybody knows that, and it's all about politics.
What have you learned about Donald Trump in the 40 years or so that you have interacted with him? Well, what the public knows, he's a liar. He lies all the time. We know that.
The claim from Trump and his allies that rising immigration to the southern border has reached crisis levels. It is not true at all, and you hear it a lot.
We know that walls do not save lives. Walls end lives.
There is a growing humanitarian and security crisis at our southern border.
All right, the crisis at our southern border is growing more serious every day.
We see what happens when we have a large influx of people on the southern border.
Unaccompanied children are pouring over, trying to come through the border in ways that we've never seen.
We, in the last month, just returned to the highest levels of illegal immigration across our southern border.
That is false, and not in a minor or nuanced way. It is what we fact checkers call super false. Immigration at the southern border isn't at an all-time high. It's near an all-time low.
The president has said that there is somehow this crisis at the border. That's a lie. That couldn't be further from the truth.
It is in the service of a lie. The president is lying to the American people about a national emergency. There is no emergency at the border. The illegal crossings are way down by all accounts.
Donald Trump is manufacturing a national security crisis.
You will hear them say is that this is a manufactured crisis. It's not a national security crisis.
The big scam of the whole address was that there's a crisis. There's not a crisis.
The notion that we have a crisis there, security crisis, is absolute nonsense.
There is not a crisis at the border. It's a manufactured crisis for the president to get a political win.
He's determined to convince you there is a crisis at the border.
I can feel myself especially heated this morning, and it's because we're talking about this crisis, and it's a crisis that doesn't exist.
House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, she's at it again. You know, stepping and stuff she really shouldn't be doing. This time she's making this absurd claim that Democrats are actually tougher than Republicans when it comes to border security. I mean, it doesn't even make sense, right? Because aren't the Democrats the ones that are calling for the abolishment of ICE?
The crisis is not on the southern border. The crisis is in the White House.
This week, he added, the migrant caravan that is openly defying our border shows how weak and ineffective U.S. immigration laws are. The facts strongly suggest the opposite.
What's this?
President Trump must stop holding the American people hostage, must stop manufacturing a crisis.
This president just used the backdrop of the Oval Office to manufacture a crisis.
Folks, the president has manufactured one heck of a political crisis for himself.
There is a massive migration crisis right now.
This migrant situation is called a crisis. And the numbers they have right now, they're not kidding. They are overwhelmed. I mean, these are stunning numbers.
Moments ago, the House passed a $4.5 billion supplemental spending bill to provide humanitarian assistance for children and families at the border. Many of us have been saying for months that unless Congress funded these facilities, beds and the like, we would be in this crisis and people would die. People have died, and we are in this crisis.
Dying. So today, the House of Representatives will pass a humanitarian aid package in excess of $4.5 billion. We will do it with a strong Democratic vote. But we are urging our colleagues on the other side of the aisle to show some decency, show some strength. Stop acting like you're part of a cult.
I am your voice.
Line Politico did a profile of you, a glowing profile, which says that you could end up being the next Speaker of the House, maybe even a presidential candidate at some time. You didn't want to weigh in on that on the Politico interview, and I'm assuming you don't want to weigh in on that now.
I'm looking forward to the job that I currently have as caucus chair.